Hello everyone. My name is Ron Braulio. Now I'm professor of English and the director of the Humanities Institute at Arizona State University. The Humanities Institute supports research and creative engagement with what it means to be human in a constantly changing world. The Tomorrow Talks series, of which this is a part, places thought leaders of today in conversation with change makers of tomorrow, our students. Each distinguished speaker explains how they use humanities perspectives to address our world's most pressing challenges. And today we have the privilege of welcoming TJ Klune, author of the novel The Bones Beneath My Skin. TJ is the New York Times and USA Today best-selling Lambda Literary Award-winning author of The House in the Cerulean Sea, Under the Whispering Door, In the Lives of Puppets, the Green Creek series for adults, the Extraordinaries series for teens, and more. Being queer himself, Klune believes it's important, now more than ever, to have accurate, positive queer representations in stories. Today, Klune will be talking with fiction writer Jenny Irish, Associate Professor in the Department of English's Creative Writing Program and author most recently of the speculative collection Hatch, published by Northwest University Press. In addition to traditional teaching, Irish partners with ASU's Piper Center for Creative Writing to support access to education by facilitating free creative workshops for students, staff, and the broader community. So I hope you'll please welcome me and join me in welcoming TJ Klune and Jenny Irish.
Hello.
Hello. TJ, thank you so much for being here with us tonight. It
Thank
is
you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
to have you. Your work has been recommended to me numerous times by students. And I feel like the intro that we just had set me up for my first question. You are unquestionably a creative thinker with a deep investment in how we learn and how we grow and how creativity can affect and strengthen our empathy. And I think you do that through the medium of writing. So, as a starting point, could you share with us a little bit about how you came to writing and how you became a writer?
Absolutely. So I have to give complete credit where credit is due. And I hope the young people, oh my God, young people, I'm so old now when I say stuff like that. I hope the young people listening will take this to heart and maybe learn a little something from it if they haven't done something similar already. I grew up in rural Oregon in the 80s and 90s. And I grew up in a not a good home. We were well below the poverty line. I was a kid who knew he was quote unquote gay by the time he was 10, 11 years old. On top of that, I had undiagnosed ADHD, which when you have this queerness inside of you in both in the literal and figurative sense of the word, you can sometimes feel like it sets you apart from people. There's an otherness about you that doesn't make you feel like you can relate to your peers. And I will say that sometimes it felt like it was a lonely existence. My escape from a very young age was into books. I would read anything and everything I could get my hands on, whether it was fiction, whether it was nonfiction, whether it was filled with words that I did not know or did not understand. And what I learned very early on was that this was the escape that I wanted. But I grew up in a household where things like reading were things I got made fun of for, that I was the kid who liked to go outside into the woods with a book rather than go play with other people. And I got made fun of that by adults who should have known better to do something like that. And so I learned that things that brought me joy were things that could be taken away. So I fostered my love of reading and in turn writing in secret. It was something that I never shared with anybody. I was that stereotypical kid who'd be up late at night with a flashlight and a blanket pulled over my head and would be reading and writing stories. I was obsessed with the X-Files when I was like 12, 13 years old. So I would be writing stories in the X-Files universe, which today would be called fan fiction, was essentially what I was doing at the time. And it was not until I got to seventh grade that two people changed my life forever. Their names were Mrs. Bentz and Mrs. Pfeiffer. They were my seventh grade English teachers. One day, they gave us an assignment not too far into the school year where we had to turn a memory we had and turn it into a comedic fiction story. Now, for the life of me, I cannot tell you what the story I wrote was. I cannot remember that, but I remember so many other things in vivid detail. I remember I was dressed probably head to toe in corduroy because that was the thing in the 90s. I had a mouth full of braces. I was a tall, skinny, awkward kid, all elbows and knees. And to make matters worse, at the time, the style of glasses that you wore were that they were as big as your entire face. And what was also coming into style at the time were transition lenses, except they didn't work very well. So my eyes were always kind of, the lenses were always kind of dark. So you can imagine that kid going into the classroom with his new kids on the block folder, getting ready to turn in the story, only to find out in that moment that my two teachers were evil. Why? Because they decided instead of doing what I thought they would do and take our stories home to grade them, they gave us busy work and began to grade them right in front of us. So, me, who's already a socially awkward, anxious, flop sweat of a kid, cannot do the busy work because all I'm doing is watching my new kids on the block folder get higher and higher in the stack. It's finally my turn. Mrs. Bentz opens my story and begins to read. And then she does something that she had not done with any other story before. She begins to laugh. It gets louder and louder and louder. It gets so loud that Mrs. Pfeiffer comes over to see what's going on. And Mrs. Bent starts the story over from the beginning. And by the time they both finish reading, they're laughing so hard they're crying. That was the very first time in my life that I understood that the written word has power, that it can make people feel a certain way. I understood it without context because I knew how I felt when I read books, but I did not know that I could do that to other people. They were the first people in my life to tell me I was good at something. And that happened to be writing. In my last class with them, they told me one day they would see my name on a book in a bookstore. I am here. I am proof positive over the power that some teachers can have with their students. Without them, I don't know where I would be. Now, Mrs. Benson and Mrs. Pfeiffer were older when I had them, and they've since passed on. However, in 2023, I got to go back to that small town that gave me so much strife and so much pain and go to the library that I would go to every day during the summer and give a talk about one of my books, In the Lives of Puppets. I spoke to a room full of 300 people. And I told that story about Mrs. Benson, Mrs. Pfeiffer. And what I did not know was that Mrs. Benson's son was in the audience. And he came up afterwards and told me who he was, and that since his mother had passed, he had heard so many stories like the one I told about his mom. And again, I just want to say that full circle moment was so amazing. And I would not have had that had I not gone back to the place that caused me so much angst and suffering. But I did, and I got to have that full circle, tiny little human moment. And that's where I think most of my stories are born, from tiny little human moments like that.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. That's a beautiful story. And I'm glad that you got to return to that space and have the experience of feeling welcome there and having that sense of
Oh,
unity.
yeah. My librarian was the first person I came out to at age 16. She was the first person to ever give me books with gay people in them so I could
Mm.
read them. Unfortunately, at the time, everything was AIDS fiction and memoirs because this was the 90s. And of course, that's what queer men and gay men were going through at the time. So there wasn't a lot of happiness in a lot of those books, but at least I got to see myself on page. At least I got to see stories about people like me.
Yes, and that's work that you can continue to do now very intentionally, thinking about representation and positive representation and accurate positive representation. So this sets me up for our next question.
Yeah.
We're here tonight talking about the bones beneath My Skin, this beautiful book I have on my shelf behind me,
Yes.
these sunset glittery colors. And though the novel's set in the 90s, the themes
Mhm.
of the work feel very opportune, particularly the strong message of people supporting one another through despair and instability. I wondered if you would talk about what you see as the role right now in our current climate of the hopeful book.
Yeah. So, one of my favorite things about writing, especially, so I'm sorry, I don't know who to attribute this to, but it's still the funniest thing to me is that authors set their books in the 80s and 90s because either A, that's when they were born, or B, things like cell phones would ruin their plot. So it's a big thing that I love. Like this tickles me plenty. I grew up in the 90s, so I get that. But yeah, there's sometimes where like, well, if I just put a book back there, I don't have to worry about anything else. But um, look, fiction always goes with the time. It absolutely does. Like I mentioned earlier, in the late 80s and early 90s, and even well into the 2000s, most fiction involving gay men was HIV, AIDS fiction, and or memoirs. Very necessary stories that needed to be told because for a generation of queer men, for gay men, they had their back turned on them by the political the people in power at the time, and so many people died. And I remember the first one of the very first books I ever read with gay people in them was a book called The Front Runner by Patricia Nell Warren. It's not as well known today, but at the time it was considered the first critically and commercially written gay novel. It was even optioned to become a movie by Paul Newman, taking as a starring role. But essentially, Patricia Nell Warren was a straight white woman, and she wrote this beautiful love story about a college coach who's training one of his runners for the Olympics, and they get together. Their whole book is their love story. And I'm about to spoil a 56-year-old book. I apologize, but the end of the book is the runner Billy is shot in the head. He's assassinated. That's the end of the book. And when you're a kid and you read that and you think, is is that what people like me deserve? Is that what we have to get? I get told that from other people all around me all the time. So when I'm thinking about what I wanted to do with books and when I was growing up, I never wanted to make a queer person feel that way. I never wanted to make a person like me because even now in 2025, there are queer kids in rural areas who may not get the same access to everything that anybody else gets, and maybe their escape is through books. And why do I want to give them a book where people being who they are is the reason that they're harmed or the reason that they get sick or the reason that they get made fun of or this or that? Hope to me is can be a profound thing, especially living in the times that we live in currently. And look, I'm not going to argue politics here. I'm not going to get into what I think people should or should not believe, but I will say this. I'd like to believe that most of us have human decency, that most of us are capable of empathy. And I think reading makes people more empathetic because it gives you a chance to walk a mile in other people's shoes. Hope is a profoundly necessary thing, but there's also, a line. What happens when you get into toxic hope? What happens if, you just keep pushing up against that wall? I want people who read my books to, when they finish, that they can walk away thinking maybe all they get is a surface read and they walk away feeling a little happier, or maybe they get in deeper into the fiction and or to the read between the lines and think, I can relate to this, or is this a good trait to have, is this a bad trait to have, or this character does this, what would I do in a situation like that? And I just think that kind of hope is so absolutely necessary. It doesn't mean that from the beginning to the end you can't have bumps in the road to get you to that end, but I just love the idea of people as a hopeful creature to the end. That's who we are. We are built on hope. Everything we do is filled with hope. We wouldn't have gone to the moon if we didn't have hope. It's just all these kinds of things.
Yeah, thank you. So, staying with this particular book, The Bones Beneath My Skin, I would describe this as a little bit more mature than maybe the Cerulean Chronicles. Does that feel
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I know a number of people in preparing for this opportunity to sit down and talk with you and in talking with students about your work, I talked to a number of fans who've read the Cerulean Chronicles with either their children, or I also have the privilege of working with a lot of students who are thinking about teaching themselves in the future and work with young children now. So, what I heard over and over again is that those books have been an incredibly effective and stable bridge for intergenerational discussion about identity, about belonging, and about the experience of otherness, and about a possibility for change. So I'm sure that this is praise that you've heard multiple times before. What do you hope The Bones Beneath My Skin will encourage between readers of different ages and experiences?
Absolutely. So we live in a time right now where it feels, I'm going to be careful how I say this. We live in a time right now where it feels like so many of us are being watched, targeted. We see it happening in states where they attempt to change laws because one trans kid wants to play a sport. And instead of worrying about, oh, I don't know, the education, how they rank in education or how they rank in food insecurity and houselessness, they spend their time and taxpayer money to go after a kid who's just trying to play a sport, live their best life. I think that with something like The Bones Beneath My Skin, I always want to have this idea that we may be small little things, but small little things when they come together can enact big change. It absolutely can. And sometimes it's the littlest voices that we have to listen to. Even if as does Art in the book, even if she spends half her time talking about her love for bacon, we still have to think about, what she sees, what an outsider sees about humanity. That's what I found fascinating with Art's characters. What would an outsider think about us if they came in? Let's say, okay, I'm going to push it back even a little bit further. Do I believe that aliens exist? Yeah, sure. Do I believe there are green men with coming in spaceships? No, I don't know. Do I believe that if they find a fish on another planet that that's considered an alien? Absolutely. But what if there was an intelligent species in the world that had the power to cross space and time in ways that we do not, and they came here? What would they think about us? What would they see in us? It's kind of what I think, a lot of people would argue that they would see the rage and the death and the destruction and the pain and the misery that we seem to cause everyone everywhere. But that's, to me, that's kind of like social media. Social media, you only see the outrage about everything. You don't see the little human moments, the little interconnectedness that we all have. And there's so much more that makes us that brings us together than will ever make us apart. And I wish more people would realize it. And that's what I was writing into this book, is that from an outside perspective, we can seem to be a certain way. But when you get closer, when you get into the micro view rather than the macro, you see different little details that you might have missed before. Like Art says in the book, she has this back and forth with Nate about bread becoming toast and how it can't go back to the way it was before. And she tells him, "You're not toast. You can become anything you want to be." And it's so profoundly simple and kind of simply stupid at the same time to for her to do something like that. But I love, because that is such a weird thing to say, but it's such a human moment that she shares with him. And I think that's important, is that we are so much more than the sum of our parts. We are so much greater than how an outsider might think we are. We just have to get through the ugly to find the light.
Mm. So art is such a fantastic vehicle for wisdom in that she is simultaneously very innocent and childlike, but has a precociousness without spoiling anything that suggests that she is more than just a child. And from her, um, other characters are able to accept these often comedically presented, but very deep thoughts and really engage with them, whereas they might avoid them if they were coming from another adult person or someone else in their life. So I had such appreciation for art, both for how she's used in a way that is comedic and
Mm-hmm.
incredibly charming, but also how she represents that importance of listening to
Oh, absolutely.
who we would not necessarily give our time and attention to, who we don't always invite the opinions of children, of the
Hmm.
when we are considering deep matters. I wonder, can we shift gears a little bit? And can I ask you, for the writers that I know are here, some of the things that I know that they're thinking about?
Hmm.
Okay. So there is a debate among both writers and readers about the relationship between a book and its audience. And I know you have a very intense following of people who really appreciate your work, who
Yeah, that's one way of putting it.
yeah, feel
Yep.
deep, deep connection with it.
Yeah.
And so the question that I want to ask you is, as a writer, and you can answer this broadly or you can answer this personally, of course, do you think writers write first for themselves or with a readership in mind? And do you have a specific audience who you're writing for?
Hmm.
And then, whether you do or you don't, at what point does the reader become part of your writing process, if they do at all?
Yeah. So those are all good questions. So I got some advice very early on in my career. But this advice was this: no matter what you write, somebody will love it, somebody will like it, somebody will be indifferent about it, somebody will dislike it, and somebody will hate it, no matter what you do. Go think of your favorite book of all time. Then go onto Goodreads and look at all the one-star reviews of that book. That is just how it works. So writing advice can often feel like a dime a dozen, but this is something that I hold personally true, and I believe that it's something that many writers should follow. You should not write for what you think your audience wants you to write, because at the end of the day, people are fickle. And you will never be able to please anybody. And in actually trying to please everybody, you run the risk of pleasing no one at all. You run the risk of something being so half baked that it does not compute or does not resonate with anyone whatsoever. Now, writing can be considered a self indulgent thing because as authors, we are putting bits and pieces of ourselves into the work that we do. We are putting life experience, what we know to be true, or what we believe, and we put bits and pieces of ourselves. It's not always all of ourselves, but each character might have a little twitch, a little thing that they do that is resemblance to the author. When I write, I am not thinking about my readers, and I'm not saying that to be mean in any way, shape, or form. I'm thinking about the story that I want to write. Because if I start letting all the voices come in from the outside, I'll never be able to write the story that I want to write because I'll be too worried about what anything else does. That being said, I do admit to thinking about queer readers first and foremost, because I'm a queer man who has this platform to be able to tell the stories that I do. And I love being able to tell my queer readers, I wrote books about us. I wrote them for you. Here, look, it's you, it's me, it's all of us, it's how we are. We're not a monolith. Everybody's going to be a little bit different, but look, here's the broad strokes of who we are. And I don't take that even into consideration until I'm done. I want to focus on the story. I don't want to focus on any outside influences because once I get set on the story I want to write, I have ADHD, so I hyperfixate like a motherfucker. It's just what I do. And I have to go through. So it's just part of who I am. Write the story you want to write because no one else can write the story that you can. Don't write what you think other people want to read. And the last little piece, please, please, please do not chase trends. Something that is popular now is not going to be popular 2 years from now when your book potentially could be published. If you want to write a story based on something that's currently popular trend wise, that's what you should do then. That's totally great. But do not chase trends because you think that that's going to be something you can get on the bandwagon for, because by the time you get there, it'll be over. Write what you want to write, the story you want to write, no matter how weird, no matter how wonderful, no matter how soft or quiet or loud or violent, whatever. Write what you want to write.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. As much as writing is this, I think, very personal experience and often something that we practice in solitude. Ultimately, the writing is going out into the world.
Hmm.
I do think oftentimes for younger writers and writers who are in the workshop environment, there's this tension between wanting to write for themselves and be uncensored, and then also wanting to please the other people in the room. So
Hmm.
I really appreciate everything that you just said and the depth
Yeah.
which you discussed that.
Because
Um,
if you write for yourself, you're going to be able to figure out what kind of a voice you have. Because you're always going to be refining your voice. Look, I've written over 30 plus books. I've been doing this for 15 years. I'm still working on the voice that I have. And you're going to continue doing that for the rest of your life. You just got to start and learn where to find it.
Thank you so much. So, also, in preparation for this opportunity to sit down and talk, there are some students who are going to speak with you directly later, but I also had students who were nervous about that prospect, but
That's totally
still
okay.
wanted
I'm desperately uncool. So there's no reason to be nervous. So you're fine.
still wanted to ask questions.
Yeah.
So if you are open to this, and
Yeah.
you are, thank you.
Yeah. Of
I
course. Go
have
ahead.
a number of questions from students, and I love this first question because I think it reminds us that as writers, it's also important to be human and allow ourselves downtime and breaks and not just endlessly chase the project and
Hmm.
progress. So the first question is, do you have books or movies or other media that renew or revitalize you as a writer?
Absolutely. So contrary to what I write, I am a huge horror fan. I love horror. I read everything horror. I'm reading right now. I'm reading, what is it? Hold on, I have it up here. Andrew Joseph White is a wonderful trans author. He wrote a book a couple of years ago called Hell Followed With Us. That was one of the coolest zombie novels I have ever read. And he's just put out a new book called You Weren't Meant to Be Human. And sorry, I'm gonna have to do this. This is the first line of the book. This is the first chapter. It's one chapter and it's one line. Crane doesn't know this yet, but he's been pregnant for almost 3 months already. And that's the first line of the book. That is, holy crap, man. That line is wonderful. That line is dynamic. I love video games. I'm a big, huge video game nerd. There's a video game sequel called Ghost of Yote that's coming out in a few days that I am already salivating over. And comfort wise or recharge, my comfort show that I can probably have memorized and can watch forwards and backwards is Breaking Bad. I know that show so well. I loved it to pieces. It and the X-Files are my things that I can just, if they're on, I will just sit there and watch them until they go away. But yes, those are the things that rejuvenate me. And I love getting, I'm very lucky in my career where I get sent a lot of books where for people wanting me to read. And I can't talk about it yet, and I'll be posting about it more in the future. But there's this book that I just read that is one of the coolest trans protagonists I've ever read in a book, and I am so ready to sing my praises for this novel when it comes out next year. So I'm so lucky I get to read what other people are doing in the queer and trans space, and it's just so cool to be able to see that.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a real gift of being, again, a writer who is a part of a community and who makes themselves accessible as you get
Yeah.
early access to people's work and then you get to just champion it.
Oh man, one of my favorite novels of the past 20 years is Rika Aoki's Light from Uncommon Stars.
Mm.
She is a trans woman. The entire cast is primarily Asian and trans. And I got to read that book early. And now my screaming effusive praise is on the front of the book because this book is one of the best queer novels of the last 20 years. It is mind-blowing and wonderful. And since then, I've gotten to become Rika's friend, and I am so excited for her because she has a cool new project that she's going to announce someday soon. I love being able to do that because it shows that these voices not just mine. I'm a cis white dude, man. Not just mine, but the other voices also matter. The trans voices like Andrew Joseph White, Rika Aoki, Anna Marie McLemore, they are writing so many cool, profound stories that only they can do. And I'm so thrilled to be able to witness their success.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love your enthusiasm for other writers. There's often a sense that the writing world is competitive, and in some ways it can be, but I
Yeah,
also really believe that there is space and also readers for everyone.
absolutely. Do you know how many books exist? You don't like one book, you can go pick up a million different other books to
Nothing
read.
will
It's
ever
totally
read.
fine. Yeah, right. It's so wonderful that, especially now, the world may seem to be sliding backwards in a few ways, and I totally understand that. And yes, there are still Black authors who are underrepresented in the genre, specifically in fantasy and science fiction. And a lot of BIPOC authors do not get the same coverage that maybe someone like myself might get. But if we continue to champion the voices of people who are around us, man, we can lift so many people up because fiction has always been progressive in the ideas that we can look forward and we can think about the world around us. Sometimes they're good thoughts, sometimes they're bad thoughts, but it's just how it is.
Thank you. I have a question from Jeremy, who is a really fantastic student who has recently discovered your work and listened to it on audiobook. And Jeremy's question was listening to your work on audiobook, he wonders, does hearing your characters perform by someone else shape the way that you think about them?
So, confession time. I have never sat and listened through to one of my audiobooks all the way through. It is I'm gonna I'm gonna be blunt about why. So I wrote a book, started writing a book in 2014 called Wolf Song. It was recently a couple of years ago re-released by my publisher Macmillan and Tor, and I was listening to the proofs that the audio narrator sent over, and I randomly just clicked into one scene without looking what it was, and I opened it right in the middle of a sex scene that I had written. And I was like, I am gross. What is this? What did I do? So I clicked off. I have never been able to listen to it, anything I've written ever since then. That being said, Daniel Henning performs The House in the Cerulean Sea and Somewhere Beyond the Sea. I still listen to auditions.
Mm,
So when The House in the Cerulean Sea was getting its start in 2019 before it would come out in 2020, Macmillan Audio, a guy named Drew, sent me an email and said, "So look, I know you want something theatrical. You have to have theatricality with these voices to be able to set them apart. I have a
mm.
guy named Daniel who's been in theater for 30 years. He lives in Silver Lake, California. He's well entrenched in the queer scene there. He and his husband live there, and he's been in theater for all these times. He does all these other things. He normally records college textbooks for mathematics and philosophy and stuff like that. Computer guides, programming guides, that's what he normally records. So I listened to his audition. I heard his Chauncey voice. I said, absolutely. Sign him now. And the rest is history. I don't give feedback to him. He and I are friends now. We've known each other now for going on 6 years. I don't give him feedback. I tell him these characters are now yours to do what you want with. Your interpretation of them may not be one to one with mine, but it's your interpretation of it. It's why when people send me or draw art or create art from what I've written, it's a different interpretation. Everyone is different, but everyone is exactly right because it's their interpretation of it. So hearing my own words read back to me, sometimes I can take it in small bits and pieces, but it's very awkward for me to hear my own stuff. And so I give the joy and the trust to my narrators to do what they want. And so far they've done pretty well, I think.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Something that we talk about a lot is giving up control of your work when you
Hmm.
put it out into the world, that
Yeah.
you can't travel with it, you can't be there to explain or defend it. And there's a kind of beautiful trust in handing your work over when you publish it and giving it to a broader audience and trusting that the
Hmm.
people who encounter it are going to do good things with it, even if it's
Yeah.
not exactly what your intention was. So
Exactly.
before we invite in our student panelists, I wonder if you would share with us what you're working on now.
Yeah, absolutely. So last month I finished a book that I've been trying to write for 10 years. There have been so many different iterations of this book. And when I moved to where I live now, there just happens to be a train that runs near me. And every now and then I can hear the horn. And for some reason, that train was the final lock I needed in this key to write this book. And it is a big, huge, gargantuan. It is my ode to Stephen King novels, to Robert McCammon novels. It is a big, huge, multicast novel that is it's crazy. But my favorite thing that I want to talk about right now is next April. I have a something that is very different. It is actually the shortest novel I've ever written. It comes in at 144 pages, I think. It's called We Burned So Bright, and it is about what would happen if a wandering black hole found its way to the Milky Way galaxy. My editor randomly told me once that there's a 1 in a million, a 1 in a trillion chance that a wandering black hole would make its way to our galaxy, a rogue black hole. You don't tell that to a person with ADHD because then they hyperfixate on that. And then 3 weeks later, I had written this entire short novel about two older queer men who have been together for 40 years. The Earth is 30 days away from being swallowed by this black hole, and they have to do one last thing on the opposite side of the country, and it's their road trip from the beginning, from the East Coast to the West Coast, to deal with something that they promised to somebody. And it is holy crap. I am so proud of this book. I cannot wait for you all to read it. It's writing something that I really, non-writers don't always understand this. Writing a short novel or a short story or novella is so much harder than writing a long story, a huge novel, because you have to pack so much of all what you want into the shorter thing. I thought We Burn So Bright was going to be just like a fluke, like a test to see if I could do it. But then I fell in love with it and completed it. And now it comes out in April. And I hope you all read it. It's wonderful.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that with us. And also, congratulations.
Thank you. I'm so excited for it.
So, I would like to go ahead. This is the part of the evening that I've most been looking forward to connecting you as students. So, I'd like to go ahead and invite our student panelists to join the discussion. We have three advanced fiction students, Ryan Christensen, Joshua Yordi, and Macy Keller. And then we also have joining us Lucas Keller, who is an English teacher in the schools. Ryan, Joshua, Macy, and Lucas, do you want to join us now? Hi, this is Ryan. Ryan, would you like to go
Hello.
ahead and ask TJ your question?
Hello. Sure, yeah, absolutely. So, you were talking about queer representation. I was super curious about how that is done at like a technical level as well, because a lot of like narrative structures in romance and fantasy, as far as I know, which is not that much, uh, come from like heterosexual like relationships and like
Mhm.
heteronormal like norms and stuff like that. And so, do you find that like writing queer stories calls for different narrative structures, or just writing queer stories into those existing structures, sort of redefine them in new ways?
Right. So let's talk about, let's say, The House in the Cerulean Sea. That book is by far my biggest book to date. It has, it's a lot of cool stuff are going to be happening with that book in the future. The word gay is only mentioned twice in that book the entire time. There's no other mention of homosexuality, bisexuality, being queer, being gay. It's mentioned twice. And the reason being is because I wanted to show that this is normal. This is who everybody is. You don't have to define. My queerness is not my defining factor. My queerness is not the only thing about me. It's not even the biggest thing about me. And when I'm going into a story like this, I don't want to have like big red flags to go, look, this guy is gay. He is facing gay troubles. Let's do gay things over here the gay way. I'm showing how a person exists in the normal world and they just happen to be gay. And I think that's important to do. In a book like The Bones Beneath My Skin, there's a little bit more of a discussion with it because it's set in the 90s. And in the 90s, this was a time of don't ask, don't tell, where people in the military, where one of the main characters is coming from, you were not allowed to speak about it. You could be gay so long as you didn't tell anybody about it. If you went to like a military sponsored event, like a ball, everybody else could bring their partners, but you absolutely couldn't because that would be telling. And people then were then discharged, dishonorably discharged from the army for breaking that rule. But I don't look at heteronormative stories in terms of their structure because I want to break apart that structure as much as possible. I don't like the idea that you have to follow certain rules. One of the big things that I hate more than anything else, and I'm sorry if this has been drilled into your heads, the idea of show, don't tell. Man, some of the greatest things I've read have been told, not shown. It's just how it's how the story person is. I try to go into each book I'm writing not thinking about how it bumps up against heteronormative norms. Rather, I'm just putting my queer people into this world because we are already there and we already exist. And gosh dang it, we can go on adventures just like everybody else can. Thank you for that question, Ryan. I really like that.
No,
Yeah.
thanks. Is
Thank you,
good
Ryan.
response.
Ryan is just a voracious reader and a really, really bold writer.
Please keep doing that. That's if one thing I can impress upon all of you, please read as much as you write. Read fiction, read nonfiction, read fan fiction, read whatever makes you happy. Just please continue reading.
So next we have Macy. So Macy is also an advanced fiction student, and Macy is someone who also works with younger kids as a tutor.
Awesome. Hi, Macy.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing well, thank you. So, as a young writer who is kind of looking forward at traditional publishing, I love hearing people's experiences of when they started that process, maybe querying or going on submission for the first time. I was curious if you'd be willing to share about how it was when you first started on that process.
Absolutely. So it's going to come in two parts. First, because my first book came out way back in 2011. It might not seem that long ago to some of the older people listening, but in terms of publishing, that's a long time ago. That might as well be a different age. Because with my first book, what did I do? I wrote my first book, a family dramedy. It had no science fiction, no fantastical elements. It was just about a family that happened to have gay people in it. I went online, I Googled gay publisher, clicked on the first one, sent them my book. They said, sure, we'll publish this. And then 8 months later, it came out. And I still don't know what happened with that. Now, I stayed with them for a while, and then I started to get a little antsy about wanting to go different places. So look, publishing journeys are going to be different. What happens to one is not going to happen to another. In 2016, an agent named Deidre Knight reached out to me via Twitter DM saying she had read one of my books and wanted to represent me. I said, no, thank you. I want to keep my money for myself. And so, because all in my head, I was thinking, well, I already have a publisher who's willing to publish whatever I write. And what would having an agent mean? That would mean I would just have somebody who's taking my money away from me. So what did I do? I wrote The House in the Cerulean Sea like a year, 2 years later, and went crawling back on my hands and knees to Deidre Knight and said, hey, remember me? I have a new book. Maybe you might want to read this. And Deidre Knight, for some reason, said, yeah, okay, I'll represent you. And now here's what happened. This isn't a story where we sent this to the House in the Cerulean Sea to Macmillan and Tor, and they were like, sure, we'll take this, we'll publish this. It was rejected from 10, 15 different publishers. My favorite one was, and it got rejected by Disney, their publishing arm. And the reason being was that nobody understood how do they put this? Nobody quite could figure out how they would portray the Antichrist because the Antichrist is a 6-year-old in my book. And how would they position that? This is a book written towards, any age could read this book. If a kid is going to read this book and they have to read about the Antichrist, no, we can't do that. That might be we can't do stuff like that. My agent gave me really good advice when I was feeling discouraged at that moment. She gave me really good advice. She said, all it takes is getting your book into the hands of the one person who sees something with it. You're going to hear no a lot. When you hear that, yes, that's going to be the best day of your life. And what would you know? A week later, Macmillan and Tor were like, hey, we want to publish you for the rest of your life. And I said, okay, sure, why not? Look, my journey is not the same as everybody else's, obviously. I don't have the education that you guys have. I have a semester of community college under my belt. You guys are far more prepared for this journey ahead than I was when I started. A lot of publishing, and I wish this wasn't so, a lot of publishing comes down to luck. It absolutely comes down to luck. The House in the Cerulean Sea released on March 17th of 2020. Do you know what else happened that week in the United States? That's when nobody could go anywhere. So what did people do? They stayed home. They read for the next year and a half. We didn't get to go places. That an event like that could never happen again. People needed something to give them hope. And so they read The House in the Cerulean Sea, and it just blew up from there. It when you get that first rejection, it's going to sting. It will. When you get that second rejection, it's going to sting. Third, fourth, fifth. Trust me, I've gotten plenty. But the thing is, though, is that it never killed the drive in me to want to continue because I knew I could tell stories in a certain way. I knew I could do that. And so I didn't change what I did. We just found the people who put up with my crazy. It's just how it goes. So thank you for that question. And I hope that you get to go on some kind of crazy journey like that too. Trust me, right now, you guys are so much better off because there's so much social networking that could be done online with like pitch fests where you outline your work and then agents review, and if they like what they see they can invite you to send them pages and stuff like that. There are so many cool opportunities. It just depends upon what kind of route you want to take, because I've been self-published, I've been indie published, and I've been traditionally published. It depends on what's right for you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that question. I appreciate it.
So next we have Lucas Keller, who is Macy's partner, or they're one another's partners. Lucas is a good man. He has been doing student teacher conferences all day, student parent conferences all day.
Oh, fun.
So I think you're one of these, amazing teachers who you talk about. Go for it, Lucas.
Awesome.
Yeah, hi. So my question, I've personally loved the way that you portray hope in your book, specifically within the characters that you choose to create and the stories and the stories of change that they go through. And I would love to get some insight on where your hope specifically stems from, and then how you make those choices of how you portray that hope within your books. I know we talked about hope a little bit so far, but just
No, that's okay, because I have a good way to go with it. So I've told you guys that I think that a lot of problem with some writers is that they have to think that the big stories have to come from big places, and that is not the case. An example, really quick, my book In the Lives of Puppets, which is a retelling of Carlo Collodi's The Adventures of Pinocchio, except it's a post-apocalyptic future where robots have taken over, and it's this big wild story. That book exists because I bought a Roomba vacuum cleaner, and this stupid little machine got itself stuck in a corner and made the saddest beeping sound I've ever heard in my entire life. And I was like, what? Why would it make that noise? And then I thought to myself, what if that was like a character? What would he be like? Oh, well, he'd be a socially anxious little guy, wouldn't he? But he wouldn't be the main character. The main character would have to be human. So is this main character human in a family of robots? So maybe he was raised by the robots, but if he's human, there needs to be some kind of medical machine that would raise like they have in hospitals. But what if that medical machine was a sociopath? And it just keeps on going from there and there and it builds. But look, when we were deep in the pandemic, I used to be on social media so much more. Now I could care less about social media. I don't find it useful in any regard. But back in 2020, 2021, I remember I was on Facebook for some reason. I still had Facebook, and I never looked at my direct messages because sometimes they were kind of weird. But randomly, this notification popped up, and I clicked on it, and I opened up this box, this text box with this person, and I saw in the profile picture it was of two dads, a couple, and their kid. And in the direct message in brackets was a note from dad, and it said, "My son has read The House in the Cerulean Sea, and he'd like to talk to you about it." What followed was this stream of consciousness book report from this 7-year-old kid about my book. He told me the things he liked. He told me the things he didn't like. He told me his favorite character. He told me that he wishes he could go to a beach like that. And then it started, the tenor of the note, the text started to change. It said that he has been feeling very sad as of late because he can't go out and see his friends. Nobody can go out into the world, and that this book made him feel like he had his friends again. And then right after that, it said, "Would you like to see my Chauncey costume?" And I said, forgetting I was speaking to a child, I wrote back in caps, "Hell yes, I want to see your Chauncey costume." And I apologize for that briefly. But then the dad sent this picture of this skinny little white kid in head to toe in a green spandex bodysuit. He had put suction cups on his arms. He had taken paper towel rollers and put them on the top of his head for the stalks for Chauncey's eyes. And then on the top, he had put golf balls. And in the middle of that was a little bellhop cap. Now, that is such a profoundly huge moment to me. It knocked me flat. It absolutely bowled me over and knocked me flat, humbled me in ways that I still am in awe about. But at the same time, it's such a little thing. It's a little thing to everybody else in the world who doesn't know who I am or what I do or what I write. It doesn't matter to anybody else, but it mattered to me, this tiny little thing. And that tiny little thing is hope. That tiny little thing right there, that kid, whoever he grows up to be, I know that he is surrounded by people who love him, who will cherish him, and who will not only do all of that, but will push him to become the best version of himself. For all we know, I got introduced to who's somebody who's going to be the most famous designer the world has ever known, because he did all of that crap himself. For all I know, he's going to be one of the most profound authors the world has ever seen. And maybe, just maybe, I got to play a tiny, itty bitty, insignificant part in that. That's why I do what I do, and that's what hope means to me.
Well, thank you so much. That is wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. I appreciate it. Anytime I can shout out about that kid, I do.
And then our final question for the night will be from Josh Yorty. Josh is also an advanced fiction student and a beautiful writer, and also a very, very generous peer.
Awesome. Hi, Josh. Joshua.
Hi. Hi. Yeah, you can call me Josh, and thank you. That
Okay.
was so kind. Um, so my question is, as an aspiring author myself, I take a lot of time trying to understand the motivations for not only my characters, but also myself as the writer.
Mhm.
So what motivates you when you decide to dive into a story that you love? And what motivations do you find make characters the most memorable?
So there is an idea of writers will write tropes instead of characters because tropes are popular. Tropes do this, tropes do that. My books are always character driven. They are always character focused first. Why? Because I find that characters drive the drama. Like I said earlier, words have so much power. You can fall in love over words. You can start wars over words. You can do all these different things. But when it comes to motivation, it's basically what the characters are telling me to do or where I think the story is going to go. I do something that not a lot of people do. I not only do I outline like crazy, like I'm talking my outline for The House in the Cerulean Sea and its sequel was probably 100,000 words on its own. And it's not all stuff that I'm putting into the book. I'm putting in stuff in there, that's stuff that's sometimes just for me. Like, what is a character's favorite food? What do they have nightmares about? What are they trying to do from point A to point Z at the end of the book? Who are they at the beginning? Who are they at the end? What do I want to try to do with this story? I'm not sitting there going, well, I need to insert politically correct message here. I need to do in politically correct message here. I'm trying to be as organic as possible with the story. These outlines are not set in stone. They are living documents in that I can change them as I go on should the story entail. With the motivation, I find that helps me to be in the story like that. When I'm out in the world, I have created playlists on my phone that are just songs about the book I'm writing or the story I'm trying to write, and that's all I listen to when I go out into the world. I am enmeshed in whatever story I'm writing. The second thing that I do that some people look at me crazy for, and this is a weird thing that not a lot of people do, something that is very important to me when it comes to motivation and when it comes to telling a story is how a character sounds, how they talk. Dialogue is so profoundly important when it comes to writing, because how many times have you read a book where a character speaks and you're like, that's not how a human person sounds? That, I mean, we're seeing it more and more with ChatGPT and the rise of how machines talk and how they look. It's distinctly inhuman. Something I do is when I finish with the first draft of a book, I will go back and read all the dialogue out loud. I read every single dialogue out loud to make sure it sounds like a human person speaking. It doesn't matter if it's a traumatic scene with big moments or a quiet scene where it's just characters relaying information. In that way, I can hear how the character is supposed to sound, and that helps me with their motivation. Am I making their intent clear if it needs to be clear, or do I need to muddy the waters a little bit more? Am I being too on the nose or too blunt? It comes down to who you are as a writer, but I am a planner. My ADHD would not allow me to not plan, because if I tried to write just by going, my stories would be 2 million pages long and they would not make any sense whatsoever. And my editor would murder me. So to me, I have to do it in a certain way to be able to hyper fixate is what it is on my work. Motivations to me come through learning about the characters and learning to do what I'm going to do. Last thing I'll say real quick, and this is important to me for how I work. If you have to do research for your story, do the research before you start writing. Please do as much research as you think you need to be. It is so much better to be over prepared than it is to get to a point where you have momentum in your story and you have to stop because you have no idea what you're talking about. That is one of the worst things in the world. So please don't do that. Anyways, thank you for that question, Josh. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. As is the case with all good things, conversation has to come to an end. Thank you, Ryan and Macy and Lucas and Josh, for coming tonight and asking your questions. I'm so grateful that you had an opportunity to talk with TJ. And TJ, of course, thank you so much for being here with us tonight and for sharing your experiences and your insights with such generosity.
Thank you for being the moderator. You're so good. I appreciate you.
Hold up the bones beneath my skin for us one more time. Look at that.
It's a very, very pretty book, and I am very, very proud of it. And it's very weird. And if you have the books that you have behind it, if you have a hardcover, if you take off the dust jacket, there's an imprint of bacon on the cover. That was my choice. I wanted there to be bacon imprinted on the covers.
I did not know that. I will
Yeah,
have to
take it off when you get done. You'll see bacon on the front.
Thank you so much to our audience. Thank you again, TJ. And also thank you to Dean Jeffrey Cohen and the English chair, Nush Powell, for their support. Always and ever, thank you to Kristen LaRue and Bruce Matsunaga for their help organizing this event. Additional thanks go out to Byron Escachavara and to Michael Finian from Macmillan Publishers. And finally, importantly, we want to thank the incredible ASU writing teachers who work really tirelessly to help ASU students imagine a brighter future. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.